Hello, everybody, and welcome to our very first dual video review. I am Super Marcey, and with me, as always, is the one who is terrible, the terrible Aussie, Bede Jermyn. Hello, Bede.
Hello, Marcy, and hello, everybody watching this first ever video review for the Super Network channel.
Yes, and whether you're listening to us at supermarcy.com or over at our YouTube channel, thank you very much. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/the Super Network. We are here today, and yes, we are aware this movie's been out for a little bit, but we're getting through our reviews. We're going to be talking about Wonder Woman 1984. We'll give you a quick synopsis from IMDb, which is Diana must contend with a work colleague and businessman whose desire for extreme wealth sends the world down a path of destruction after an ancient artifact that grants wishes goes missing. It was directed by Patty Jenkins, and it was written by Patty Jenkins and Jeff Johns, and I believe Dave Callahan as well, based on a story by Patty Jenkins and Jeff Johns. It stars Gal Gadot, Chris Pine, Kristen Wiig, Pedro Pascal, and features Robin Wright, Connie Nelson, and there is a fun cameo at the end.
Yes.
So, basically, with this movie, there has been a lot of very negative reviews, a lot of backlash, and the first movie from, I think it was 2017, was very well received, got excellent reviews. So, Bede, where do you sit on this one?
To be honest, Marcy, I'm finding the negative reaction to this film kind of puzzling, to be honest. Now, it's not to say that the film is perfect, and it's not quite on the level as the first film was, which I think is probably, I think, the second best superhero film of 2010s, at least in my opinion, anyway. But for this one, though, I actually really enjoyed it, and I had a really good time with it. Like I said, there's definitely flaws in it, and there are definitely certain aspects I can understand why some people weren't taken with this one as much as the first film. But at the same time, though, I'm sort of sitting there because I mean, like you, I kept hearing sort of the very divisive negative reaction from a lot of people who had seen it. And I know some people even say it's probably the worst DCEU film or probably one of the worst ones, overall comic book films. And I've even heard some people say it's almost like Batman and Robin or Green Lantern style bad. And so I was kind of interested about that because I wasn't sure what to expect. And then when I sat down and watched it, I honestly just enjoyed it for what it is. It definitely is much tonally very different from the very first Wonder Woman film. Because the Wonder Woman first one, because it is a much more serious take on the character, and which makes sense given that it's set during the First World War, so it needed to have that tone. But having it sort of set in the 80s, particularly, of course, 1984,
Yes.
the tone is definitely much more different. It's definitely a lot more lighthearted, a lot more sillier and campier. And I know some people kind of seem to be put off by that, but honestly, I feel like that's what Patty Jenkins and her crew were kind of going for with this film because it did remind me a lot of a lot of the superhero films from the 80s, like the Superman sequels and a few others. But not just that, but even just other films from that decade that were incredibly silly, like Xanadu and stuff like that, where they just kind of have this sort of really weird, bizarre campiness to it, and they kind of just go for broke with it. And I like the fact that this film, and I know you and I agree on this, is that this is a film that goes out of its way to kind of replicate that style of 80s film without it being so obnoxiously, uh, overtly 80s in terms of like, because it's a film like I know a lot of people kind of complain about, like, why is this even set in the 80s? It doesn't, there's not really, because a lot of the references and decor and stuff like that, that we've seen in a lot of 80s set films and TV shows in the past couple of years, like Stranger Things and that. I like the fact that this film doesn't overtly go out its way to be an 80s film. It's just more that's where it's set
Yeah.
and nothing else. And so it didn't feel as obnoxious to me when it came to that stuff.
Mm.
But I mean, overall, I think it is a fun film, and there are a lot of aspects of it I like. But I'm kind of curious to hear what you thought about it, though.
Yeah, I think I'm very much on the same page as yourself. Whereas I definitely picked up very early on in the film that it had that feel, and I think this was purposefully, like of the original Superman 2. The beginning sort of in the 80s was very Superman 3-esque. And there's even bits that kind of reminded me of like the Raimi Spider-Man films and sort of even a bit with the 90s. And it doesn't like throw it in your face that it's set in the 80s. It has the decor, the fashion, but they're not playing like those big pop like 80s songs
Yeah.
constantly and throwing it in your face. So that I thought was like interesting, and it was a very different kind of feel with that, but it is more lighter. It does have cheesy moments, and I think for me where it falters a little bit, while yeah there's some logic and stuff that doesn't make a lot of sense, I'm not gonna let that worry me too much. It's that perhaps it could have been trimmed down by about 20 minutes or so,
Yeah,
and
yeah, definitely.
you kind of do miss a bit more of being in Themyscira, because that opening is a lot of fun. It's very adventurous, and of course that kind of lesson that they've shown there, which obviously reflects what happens in the movie about not taking shortcuts and being honest and using the truth. And yeah, that's obviously a very big central theme in the film. And like I said, there are some things that, logic fails and such, like the invisible plane, for example, is one of those weird things. However, I did enjoy that scene, and it's just kind of fun that you get to see that in action in some way. And it doesn't come, I guess it doesn't come off as silly as it could have with the way they did it. But again, like, yeah, there's things that are like, what? But it doesn't bother me to the extent, obviously, it bothers some people. There's always a lot of like impossible travel and impossible moments in even normal movies, let alone superhero movies. And I tend to not let these things bother me that much.
Yep.
And potential spoilers with the return of Steve Trevor, played by Chris Pine. A lot of people had issues with the fact that his, I guess, spirit, soul, whichever you would like to call it, takes over the body of someone else, and that someone else, I don't know where they went. Maybe they just felt like they were in a coma for a little bit. I don't know. And they're doing all these things while he's in someone else's body. And I guess I understand the logic in doing it that way, because with how the film progresses, excuse me, with my blah blah blah, with yeah, how the film progresses and how these wishes work, there is that denouncing of your wish. So if Steve came back as Steve, she would have basically have killed him by denouncing her wish. Whereas this is just saying goodbye to like his essence or his soul, and the man at the end of the day goes back to his body,
Yeah.
which means she hasn't killed like the love of her life by having to make that decision in that way. But she did obviously say goodbye and whatnot.
Yep.
But that's just kind of how I see that. And again, I love the Superman movies, to a lesser extent some of the sequels. And obviously, I absolutely love like Supergirl the movie for all its flaws, and there's a lot that reminded me of that as well in this film. Maybe some of the things that didn't quite click with me. I think the way she was running was just so weird. I've never seen that before. I don't know why she suddenly was doing it, and it took a little bit to get used to how she uses her lasso as kind of in a similar way that like Spider-Man uses the webs. So that was interesting and weird and took a bit of getting used to. And there are some moments like that, yeah, don't quite work. There's other ones that do work. And I think, most people in this movie are generally pretty good. And, some of the performances may be a little bit over the top, but that really just goes with the character.
Yeah, and also kind of the tone of
Yeah.
the story as well.
Yeah, and I didn't really have an issue with like Kristen Wiig's character playing Barbara Minerva, who turns into Cheetah. Like, she's just that shy person, and you get a lot of that, especially in 80s movies, when you're the shy person with the glasses, you just seem to get ignored. That was like, typical trope in like 80s, even 90s, and she wants to be more like Diana, and she starts to get stronger, more confident. Like, I didn't really see much of an issue with that. And, she kind of goes on her own character arc, and the way it kind of does get left off, like, you can easily bring that character back.
Oh, yeah, and I think Kristen Wiig did a really good job in that role, kind of showing different sides of Barbara as the story kind of progresses, especially with her wish being that she wants to be like Diana. So she's becoming more confident in herself. And of course, as it goes on, she's kind of removing all that kind of meek, nerdy side of her and, becoming people like will legit stop and look at her as like, who is that woman? And you get to see that. And as the story progresses and when she kind of feels like her wish is being threatened, that is a good turn for her character, because we kind of understand why she would go against Diana. This isn't like a jealousy thing or anything like that. It's just like this is the first time like she actually has had power in her own life, and it's and the threat of it being taken away from her and going back to her old self, like that kind of frightens her. And then of course she becomes Cheetah.
Yeah.
And I have to say, like, sort of the big climactic scene, one of the big climactic battles between Wonder Woman and Cheetah. Like, I know some people have issues with the CGI, and I will admit, I kind of wish the scene was done in a little brighter, because it was a bit murky.
It was very, very
times.
dark, yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't think, so the CGI Cheetah didn't look too bad, but it wasn't great. But I think they did, at least from what I can notice, and I could be completely wrong, that it looked like a mixture of Kristen Wiig being in CGI form, but also actually using makeup and all that for the character as well. At least that's what kind of looked like. But being that it was too dark, it was kind of hard to tell.
Yeah.
But I think, the performances are pretty solid, I thought. Gal Gadot just continues to being such a wonderful presence as Diana, and her chemistry with Chris Pine just continues to be one of the highlights of the franchise so far. And I do actually love the little sequence where when it's kind of the polar opposite compared to the first film, because in the first film, once they go to the modern world, Steve was the one who showed Diana around London and stuff like that, since she's never been there before. But this time they kind of do that again with Diana introducing Steve to the world of the 80s, what's been going on in the past 60 years since his death. And I love that entire sequence, because you get to see the kind of the wonderment he has, like how the world has changed since his time. And it was like a really lovely sequence. Also, I enjoyed Pedro Pascal as Maxwell Lord. Again, some people might have issues with his performance being that it's over the top and that. But I really enjoyed the fact that basically, and he admits this himself, that he basically was channeling Nicolas Cage into that role.
Yeah.
And you can tell he's just having an absolute ball playing that character.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a lot of fun. And, Yeah, and I thought everyone did a pretty solid job for what they were doing with their
Yeah.
roles.
Yeah, I agree. And he was amazing. I did love him in this. It's just, it is over the top, and he's definitely channeling Nicolas Cage. But I
Mm.
think that Maxwell Lord is such an interesting and different foe. And it's in stark contrast to the first film, but she's still dealing with an enemy that wants more than
Mm.
what they could possibly have. And all everyone seems to kind of learn something. But I guess if they do bring back Barbara Minerva, we'll see if she did. But, when you have the wish, it takes away something as well. So it was slowly taking her humanity away.
Yeah.
And for Diana, it was taking her powers away. And I like that as the monkey's paw type of thing. And again, Maxwell Lord has to go through all this to kind of learn his lesson. But I assume they would have arrested him or something. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure at the extent of what he was doing in the last half of this movie, he would have to be,
Yeah.
because he was basically like with every, because basically like, and again, spoilers for the film, is like one of his big wish is to become a human version of uh, this wishing stone.
Yeah.
And then with every wish he gets, he becomes more and more powerful. And so basically that's his big goal, is to be having kind of respect and power, and of course realizing that there's more to life than that.
Yeah.
But that's the thing though. I mean, I enjoyed a lot of these aspects, and I do agree with what you said. I think the film would have benefited a lot better if it was at least maybe 15 minutes shorter,
Yeah.
and a bit more tighter in its pacing. But I do like that. But the thing is, though, like I know, like you were saying before about the Steve Trevor inhabiting someone's body trope. Like, I can see why some people would consider that problematic these days. But even I think Patty Jenkins said she was kind of going for that. Like, that was something that happened a lot in 80s movies.
Yeah.
And I think she was just doing that to make it feel, like we said before, like was purposely went out of her way to make a film that felt like take this film, put it in it would be no different than what other
Yeah.
films were coming out in the 80s at the time.
Yeah.
Like
Absolutely.
giving that style and
Yeah.
story structure and everything like
Yeah.
that, which some people don't seem to like. And granted, a lot of those movies that did do that during that time didn't end up being good, but you can definitely see why she wanted to go with that kind of feel.
Yeah,
and tone.
it's quite a different, take and approach, and for what the movie is, like, for me it's fine. I don't have like too many issues with it. I enjoyed it. And as I said, yeah, the things that, I didn't, I guess didn't, what's the right word I'm trying to look for? It didn't gel with me as much as some other things. But I appreciate it for, like, what it is. I don't have, like, massive issues. I'm not offended by it or anything like that. And, I say bring on the next Wonder Woman.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what worked with me about the film is, Patty Jenkins' sincerity to everything that she's doing with it, with the story, the themes, and the characters' journeys, and that. Like, this didn't seem like it was like calculated or feel like, studio driven ideas, like mandated or anything. This is something that it felt very sincere. Where and I've sort of started to realize that Patty Jenkins, who I think is a great director, like she definitely approaches with Wonder Woman, both this film and the last film. There is a sincerity to those stories, and I guess, and they have their hearts on their sleeves in no matter, even if they do come across as goofy at times.
Yeah.
But I kind of appreciate that, because we don't really see that type of thing anymore in blockbuster movies. And some people might find that cheesy, but it's kind of refreshing to kind of see at least a movie like this, and the way it ends, it does have that sort of like sincere, positive kind of message.
Yeah.
And And I'm kind of curious to see how, younger viewers, like, young girls, teenagers and that, how they feel about this film. Because even like in Australia, the film is still doing extremely well at the box office. And there's definitely people going to see it, even though
Yeah.
there's not really much in the movies at the moment. But, you know, people are still going to see it. So I'm kind of curious to see, like, if this is a film that, will it get more appreciation over time when people kind of say, oh, okay, I see what the movie is going for. Because I noticed
Yeah.
that people compare it too much to the first film, but I feel like this is a film that is trying its own thing and not doing what had already been done before in the previous film.
Yeah.
And maybe in time it might have, there might be, people might get on board with it later. But I think compared to, say, something like Batman and Robin or Green Lantern or Superman 3, which are legit mediocre to bad films, everything that happens in this film, I just can't hate it. And like, I can definitely see why people wouldn't work with people, but they seem to work with me. So I personally have no problems with a lot of the stuff that
Yeah.
what this film goes out, well, sets itself out to do.
Yeah, and it is refreshing to see a different type of superhero film, and it's not the same thing over and over. And you notice when those chances are taken, they definitely are very, the reaction's very divided, and it is what it is, I suppose. And you can say that with like Thor Ragnarok, because that was completely different to everything else, and that was very, very mixed in what people thought it was. But for me, I want to see, even if the end product isn't the greatest, I want to see more chances being taken and to try and at least do something different and set it aside from everything else. So at the end of the day, like, yeah, I'll probably watch it again and not really have any issues with it. So
yeah, definitely. And I mean, I wouldn't be surprised because Patty Jenkins is going to make the third film. That's already been confirmed. Like, I wouldn't be surprised with her third film, that's going to feel very different from not only this one, but still the first film as well.
Yeah.
So, because and I feel like that brings a freshness to this franchise because she's not doing the exact same thing. She's changing things up. Whether you like that or not, you got to respect the fact that at least she's trying to make things different and fresh.
Yeah, and it's not the same thing constantly.
Yeah, exactly.
But I guess we'll see what happens with the next one. And yeah, I guess that kind of wraps up our video review for Wonder Woman 84. What is your rating out of 5?
I'm probably going to get a lot of negative feedback about this, but honestly, anyone who knows me is like, I don't care what other people think. I'm going to give it 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed the film a lot. I expected it to be a train wreck based on the reaction, but I was still curious to see how it turned out. And I got to say, I really enjoyed it way more than I thought it was. And, it's one I'll definitely, check out again multiple times in the future.
Yeah, you probably will get a lot of feedback on that rating.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
My rating out of 5 would be 3.5 out of 5, and I'm sure I'll get hate for that as well. And again, I wasn't offended by this movie. I enjoyed it for what it was. Some things worked, some things didn't. And the more I thought on it, the more my opinions kind of changed. And I was definitely more... I liked it more. So, yeah, my rating might change down the line. But, if I had to give it a rating, that would be my rating. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. So, Wonder Woman 84, we liked it.
Yes.
And again, thank you for listening to our review. Please like and share and subscribe and all the rest.
Yep, here on the YouTube channel or Patreon or any of the many podcasting streaming services where our podcast is playing, like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Castbox, and I know we have a few others.
Yeah.
We've added to since then. I can't remember what they are. I apologize, people.
We're on.
But we'll have them all in the show notes. We'll have them in the notes below.
I think there's Pocket Cast, Podcast Addicts, Deezer, so we're literally everywhere. And please, feel free to give us your own rating for the film or whichever. It's all good. And don't forget, you can find us at our base of operations at supermarcey.com. Until next time, I've been super. Bede's been terrible.
Yeah, I have been.
See everybody. Thanks for listening.
See everyone. Bye.